Hello, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started with today's learning community. Want to let everybody know that we are recording today's call. And everyone's phones will be muted during the presentation and the conversation. If you could use the chat box that you see right next to these slides. If you have questions or comments, or during our times where we ask for information from you, we would appreciate that. And if there are opportunities to open the lines, we will let you know. So my name is Malisa Pearson, and I want to welcome you to today's learning community for family leaders, assessing the readiness of family members to become parent peer support providers. We want to start with a quick thank you to SAMHSA and the National Technical Assistance Center for funding the learning community for family leaders. FREDLA, who is dedicated to strengthening the leadership and organizational capacity of family-run organizations, is a core partner and the family hub of the TA network. The learning community was created as a vehicle for family leaders to share ideas, engage in peer learning, disseminate resources, and form a network of colleagues for ongoing support. So as we go through today's call, we hope you will take advantage of this time to share your ideas and expertise with others and learn as well. So why is assessing readiness so important? Well, lived experience as a parent or caregiver of a young person with emotional, mental, or behavioral health challenges is a critical qualification to becoming a parent peer support provider. Lived experience itself is often not enough to ensure success. And as the workforce continues to grow and expand, and as the family movement continues to promote parent peer support as a critical resource needing to be available to all families, it's increasingly important that the family members we hire be those that are most likely to succeed in providing quality parent peer support to families. In order for an organization, agency, or service system to be successful in hiring anyone, but especially family members, we need to isolate what we're looking for in these family members. We frequently hear from family leaders and family organizations that they find it very helpful for families to be, for families to be further along in their journey when they become parent peer support providers. But this can be a very difficult thing to assess. So what we're talking about as we move through today's call, as we talk about families who are further in their journey, we're talking about families who have gained a perspective and an awareness that their own child and family circumstance is part of a collective greater whole, and that they're able to see the big picture beyond just wanting to impact the needs and aspects of their own child and family, but they also want to support and impact the needs of all children and families. So it's our hope today, during this call, that we can offer you some basic characteristics, qualifications, and criteria that you can use when you assess readiness with family members. We'll also provide you with an example from the Kentucky Partnership for Children and Families about a process that they've developed to assess readiness, and we'll discuss some strategies around how to use scenario-based situation as a tool to assess readiness. And as always, and of course, we want to hear from you during today's call. So throughout the call, we will be stopping to ask for your feedback and your input, and at the end of the slides, we will have an opportunity for some open discussion. And we hope to hear from you about what you found helpful in assessing the readiness of family members in your own organization or state, what areas of readiness you might find difficult to assess, and what criteria or qualifications your organization uses to assess readiness. So let's talk a little bit about criteria and qualification. As I mentioned earlier, lived experience absolutely needs to be a criteria when identifying family members for parent peer support provider roles. But it's not enough by itself. We also often look for families who have an ability to navigate child-serving systems, such as child welfare, juvenile justice, mental health, and education. And this tells us a little bit about a family member's familiarity with systems and their ability to connect with families whose children might be connected to those systems. But in addition to those criteria, there are a few additional things to consider when you're assessing readiness. And some of those are time management skills, organizational and documentation skills, the ability to communicate effectively. Frequently, you may see family members who have either been out of the workforce for a long time, or maybe this is the first time they're entering the workforce as they're looking to become a parent peer support provider. So to be able to look for these skills, you may need to look to the family member situation. A lot of families have developed an ability to have great time management and organizational skills by learning how to juggle all of the appointments and school meetings of their child with behavioral health challenges, their other children's sporting events, their family household demands. So those are ways that you can look to see, do these family members have some of these skills and some of these qualifications that you're hoping to have. Things like shows initiative, notices and encourages growth. It's really important to be looking to see, does the family member that is moving towards the role of a parent peer support provider have a positive outlook on systems and on service delivery and intervention? Do they recognize success and progress, and are they able to celebrate those successes on their own, which will tell you a lot about, are they going to be able to help families with that as they work in a peer support role? And are they able to voice concerns and set concrete goals? And this is a really critical piece because it's important as peer support providers and as family leaders for us to identify gaps and areas for improvement, but it's also important for us to be able to offer some ideas around how that could look different or ways we could improve upon those things, because those are really important skills that they will then hopefully be able to share with families and help them develop as they move through their own journey. So now we want to take a minute to hear from you guys, and please use the chat box next to the slides, if you will, to ask you about, are there other criteria than what we have on this screen or considerations that you see as important in assessing readiness of families? Maybe you require things like the family has to have reliable transportation, or they have to successfully complete a background check. But there may be other things that you require or you think is important. So I'm going to pause for a minute here and see if any of you who are on the phone might want to type into the chat box some additional criteria or qualifications you guys find important. Give folks a minute. I see that there's several people typing. I see Janet Pereira in Miami said reliable transportation is a criteria or qualification that they look for. Jennifer indicates that the family member needs to be able to respect family's decisions. That's a great one, Jennifer. Joan indicates the ability to work as a team member is really important. That's very true. And Tanya, they must have reliable transportation, a clean driving record, and do a drug test. Okay? Judy in Illinois, nearly all of our parent peers are employed in community mental health agencies, so it's usually helpful if the child is recovered to the point they are no longer receiving services in that agency. Okay? Yep, we've heard that before. Janet, pass a background screening. Tanya offered again, must be non-judgmental and able to handle conflicts. That's a really great one. And Kathy says we look for peers who have experience with the IDEA and advocating for their child in the school system. Okay, so that's really important in that specific system to you guys. Barbara Granger indicates that they have an ability to set good boundaries. And that, again, is one we hear a lot. Well, thank you guys for offering your thoughts. And we now are going to talk a little bit about, while considering different skill sets, you also want to consider some traits and characteristics when assessing readiness. So skills and knowledge and lived experience goes a really long way. However, it's critical that the family member also have the right attitude, approach, and perspective when working as a parent peer support provider. So a few things to consider when assessing readiness as it relates to traits and characteristics may be that they have confidence. But confidence in and of itself may not always be a positive. We really want to look for family members who have confidence but also understand that they're a peer and they're not the expert, that they know a lot and they have a lot to share with families, but they also have a willingness to learn and continue to develop their understanding. Oftentimes, families who they are looking for an opportunity to give back. You frequently hear them say things like, I want to help families not have to go through such a difficult process to get access to services like our family did. And so they're looking for an opportunity to help others. They have to be patient. As all of us on the call know, change is very slow and it takes time, both with kids and families and with systems. So there has to be an awareness and an acceptance of that and an understanding that that is part of the process. You also want to look for somebody who's pretty positive and enthusiastic. You know, there are lots of things about how our systems operate and the things that families go through on their journeys that may not go as smoothly as we'd like them to, but it's important to kind of look at those things as opportunities for improvement. And for a parent peer support provider, it's critical for them to be positive and help families see the opportunity that things can get better. Now that we've talked a little bit about considerations, traits, qualifications, I want to share with you an example that the Kentucky Partnership for Children and Families shared with us. And it's a process that they've developed that they use to assess readiness as they identify families to move into the training and certification process as parent peer support providers. Carol Cecil is the executive director of the Kentucky Partnership for Children and Families, and she was really looking forward to being with us today. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join us due to the fact that her organization is in the middle of moving. So she needed to be there instead of with us today, and we told her that we definitely understood that. So we will miss her greatly, but she gave me permission to be able to share her process with you, so we really appreciate that. Kentucky's family organization developed a process in partnership with their state mental health and behavioral health agency. And the first 5 bullets that you see on this slide are kind of the prerequisite criterion that is absolutely kind of essential for them. And that includes that the family member, of course, has to have lived experience raising a child or youth with behavioral health challenges. They have to have received services from at least one state-funded agency. They have to have a high school diploma or GED. They have to complete an application, and they have to have completed a Leadership Academy weekend that the Kentucky Partnership puts on for family members. The application, which you will notice at the very right of your screen, there are a couple of documents that are available for download, and one of those is Kentucky's application and process. So Carol shared that with us, and I want to encourage you guys to take advantage and download that as a resource. But that application they use to be able to help them assess where families are in their journey and what, if any, leadership and or volunteer experience they may have had in their community. They also use their Leadership Academy weekends to focus on leadership, different leadership styles, advocacy, and kind of how to advocate effectively. And it provides them with an ability to see how families approach different systems, see what their communication skills look like, what is their willingness to learn, how open are they to learn about other people's experiences, and how open are they to different ways of moving through a family's journey. How flexible are they with change? So they use these things as a multi-level process that allows them to assess some of these other pieces that you see on your screen. So again, I want to stop here now and invite you folks to be able to offer some ideas around what kinds of processes you might have and whether or not you require things like Kentucky does, such as do you require a high school diploma or GED for a family member to become a parent peer support provider? Do other states require that families have things like the fact that Kentucky requires that a family receive services from at least one state-funded agency? So we're curious to know if other states have kind of restrictions on who can be parent peer support providers. So I'm going to wait a minute and invite folks to use the chat box and share with us what your process looks like and whether or not you require some of these same things. Okay, I see Annette indicated that their family peer providers all have raised children with mental, behavioral, emotional challenges, so you require the lived experience. That's great. And I think we've now made it so you can access those resource documents. Hopefully you can see those at the bottom of your screen. For those of you who want to download the application that I mentioned earlier. Okay, Tanya, you guys require some of the same things. We'd like parents to be able to give an example of how they've successfully advocated for their child. That's a really good idea. Janet, we can make the PowerPoint available, absolutely. Joan indicates they do require a high school diploma. They have to have received services from at least 2 state-funded agencies. They become certified by taking a 40-hour program and follow up with the credentialing process. Annette says we don't require specific schooling, but as noted earlier, specific training, the personal qualities you outlined. Services are not required to have been with a state-funded agency. Okay. So we've got both. We've got some folks who require that folks have to have received services from state-funded agencies and some that don't. All right. Barbara Granger, high school diploma, navigate child-serving systems for at least 1 year, lived experience. All right. Okay, we'll take one more and then we will move on to the next area we wanted to chat with folks about today. Annette indicated we have had parent partners with some involvement in juvenile justice system. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And if you want to continue sharing, feel free to continue sharing in the chat box. We will greatly appreciate all of the feedback. This next slide moves into after family members. So they use that first process, that first slide we just talked about, to kind of assess readiness and to meet prerequisites. Once they have successfully completed the application process and all of that assessment process, the family members who are selected to become parent peer support providers go through an extensive training process in Kentucky that's outlined in the document that you can download. And the training allows them additional opportunities to assess things, such as what you see on your screen. Things like how do they respond in problem solving in an effective manner? So they use some scenarios and they use some circumstances and some role plays in their training to see how do family members problem solve in difficult situations. Are they able to communicate effectively their own stories, but also with other family members and other system partners? And in Kentucky, they're really blessed to have some state partners that come in and help do their training. And so they're able to also kind of get a sense of how do they interface with system partners. How do they transfer leadership in an empowering way? And really what they're looking for in that sense is, are they able to help families find their voice? Are they able to help folks identify why their voice is important? Why it's important for them to advocate for the needs and wants of their child and their family, and how to do that effectively, and how families will become empowered to take the lead in their own child and family circumstances. And are they able to utilize creativity? You know, frequently we find ourselves in peer support roles in situations with families where things can look pretty difficult, pretty significantly challenging, and sometimes it's not easy to identify, you know, any way that things can improve. And so they're also looking for parent peer support providers who have the ability to be creative and kind of think out of the box and come up with ways that no matter how difficult the situation is, they can help families try to identify a path to where they want to go. They also look for performing basic office skills and paperwork. And this can be really important, as I mentioned earlier, some families that you may be looking at to move into a parent peer support role, this may be their first formal employment opportunity. They may not have had an opportunity or an ability to be employed prior to this due to the circumstances of their child and their family. Or they may have been out of the workforce for a while, and so they may need, while they may not have all these skills nailed down, they may need some extra support in those areas, such as computer skills or completing, expense forms or incident reports. So they're looking for folks who understand those things, but not necessarily that they've mastered them, that they may need, that may be an area they need some additional coaching, support, or training in as they move into the role of a peer support provider. So are there other things that you guys look to for readiness characteristics or unique things that you consider when you're hiring family members who may not have been in the workforce for a long time or who are just coming into the workforce? Such as, do you look for things such as time management skills, dress code, their ability to, be on time for meetings, those kinds of things. So, again, we'll use the chat box for folks to be able to share their thoughts and see if you guys have other things you think maybe are important for us to consider when we are assessing readiness. And that says that parents who are in recovery and may have been in the justice system themselves are some of the parent peer support providers they employ, and she says some of those are their strongest peer partners. Very important that the peer partners are also responsive to feedback and making changes. That is so important. Joan talks about handling working together with parenting their child. Not all parents have grown children. That's very accurate. They're going to work with families. These kids are all on a continuum of ages and at different stages and different needs. So they have to have an ability to kind of connect with parents in different areas of the continuum as their kids age and grow and develop and change. Give folks a few minutes to see what else. Sheila types North Carolina requires that they have to be family members and receive specific courses must be completed related to system of care and other subjects. Okay, so you guys, they need to have specific training in certain types of systems and systems of care. Barbara shared they need to be at a place within their own family's journey to live the 24/7 life of a family partner. Okay. Yeah, again, that is kind of that piece of, they have to be far enough in their own family journey to kind of be ready to take on. But there sometimes, this could be a pretty stressful, tricky position to be a parent peer support provider. And so they have to have kind of a readiness in that sense. That's a really good one. Tanya, we train parents on how to facilitate parent groups. Okay, that's another good skill. A lot of organizations and communities have support groups as part of their peer support array of services. So that's another good skill that you might want to consider family members having as they become peer support providers. Let's see if we've got one more before we move into the next section of talking about scenario-based assessment. Luann shared they need to understand we all have emotions as a result of our experiences, but also understand the necessity to be able to not let our emotions drive our actions and reactions when working with family members. Thanks, Luann. That's a really, really important piece about, again, I think it speaks to where they are in their journey that, this work, because it is peer and it's so closely related to our own experiences, it can bring up some very strong emotions, and it is important for us to be able to separate those things and be able to manage those things as we're supporting families. Leanne talks about must take into consideration that these trainings are done upon employment. Families do not have these ahead of time. Okay, very good point. And Joan, be willing to take constructive criticism around their work and owning their own issues. Yes, again, that really, Joan, really, you're speaking to stuff that a lot of our parent peer support providers need to be able to work in a culture that really promotes them taking care of themselves and supervision that really helps them develop those skills to be able to manage their own story and how it may bring up strong emotions in the work that they do with other families. Excuse me. All right, well, let's thank you, everybody, for sharing, and if you want to continue to share in the chat box, we appreciate you doing that. I'm now going to pass it over to Millie, who's going to talk with you about how you can use scenario-based assessments as part of an overall readiness assessment process.
Thanks, Melissa. Good afternoon. This is Millie Sweeney. I am a project coordinator with FREDLA, and prior to that have done a lot of work as the person who was over all the programs in a statewide family-run organization. We used a scenario-based assessment in the work that we did, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And what Lou Ann said just a minute ago is actually a great segue into this, about needing to understand your own emotions, but not letting that drive you when you are working with other families. So lived experience is a key characteristic of parent peer support providers. However, assessing where they are in their journey and where they believe they are in their journey is an important factor in identifying if they're ready to support another family or another parent. One approach is to use scenarios to gauge a family member's readiness for peer support position. This involves presenting the family member with situations and asking how he or she would respond if they were the ones providing support to a family in that situation. This allows you to do a couple of things. It allows you to have a glimpse into where they are in their own journey, and if they're far enough from their own crises or anger or any other feelings they may have, to be able to offer a non-judgmental support that's both informative and provides hope. You're able to see how the family member would apply their lived experience if they were working with other caregivers, and you can also glean information about potential areas of training or support that may be needed. It's easy to tailor scenarios to fit the position that you're seeking someone to fill or the programming of your agency, exploring situations that you know that the family member will encounter in a peer support capacity. So what we're going to do is go through a couple of examples of scenarios in the next few slides and how these can be used. The first scenario has to do with therapy. And the question is, how would you respond if you were supporting a parent or caregiver whose child was seeing the same therapist that your child and family was seeing? Now, this is important, particularly if you live in a smaller community or if there are not many therapists that were available who see children and who see families. And this brings up the question about boundaries. This brings up the question about your personal feelings about therapy and how you would talk with a parent or caregiver and letting them know that you might be in therapy. Is this a conflict? It's important to find out how a caregiver would respond in this situation. And that's a fairly common one in small towns. The second scenario, how would you respond if you were supporting a parent or caregiver whose child attended the same school where your child was not well supported and where you had not had positive relationships with the administration? This is a more common scenario because we do tend to hire family members from the communities in which they live. So it's very likely that they will run into a situation where they need to support a family through developing an IEP or addressing a behavioral issue that's occurring at the school, where they themselves did not have a good experience in either helping their own child or they could have attended there themselves. This would be an important one to find out how far away they are from those feelings and are they able to set that aside to be a positive support and to be a collaborator, bridging the conversation between the parent and the school for a better outcome. The third scenario, how would you respond if you were supporting a parent or caregiver whose family was assigned the same child welfare caseworker who had removed children from your home? That would be a pretty touchy one. Again, we're looking at lived experience and how far away you are from your feelings, or can you put those aside in order to address what's going on with another family and be able to support them. I think it's important that you look at what community you are serving, what population, and be able to ask some of those questions. to develop scenarios that are relevant to the work that they'll be doing. In some areas, we used questions around racial biases, or if you were working with a family who had a radically different view of religion than you, are you able to work within their system and not try to impose your own beliefs or your own traditions or your own culture when working with that family? So those are a few examples. I'm curious to find out if there are any other agencies that have used scenario-based assessment in doing their interviewing, and what some of the scenarios are that they use. So like Melissa did, I'd like to open it up in the chat box if there are people who'd like to share some of the things that they had used. In reading through here, Tanya says we use vignettes during the interviewing process to see how they handle different scenarios before they're hired. And Barbara said some of the sites use scenarios in a writing sample that gives a dual insight. Now that would be important because that goes back to those basic office skills. Documentation is critical. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. That would allow you the opportunity to not only see how they would respond in a situation, but also their writing skills. Are there any others? Okay, Charlene says, what would you do if you were working with a family that wanted something for their child that you felt was not going to be good for the child? That also would have some interesting responses. Are you able to work within that family's belief system, whether you believed in that or not? Can you respect the family's decisions? Joan says that she's asked a parent how they'll work with a family whose values are very much different than theirs, a parent who wants their child to go to work after high school rather than college or trade school. Those are very good examples. Another scenario, Barbara says, is how would you respond if a family wanted to be a friend on social media? That is extremely relevant to our times, and I'm sure that some of you have already been in that situation. It's something that you need to prepare staff for. Are there any other scenarios that people would like to share? Okay, I think we are going to have time for further discussion. Melissa, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Millie. I think at this point, we really wanted to give you guys an opportunity after everything we've kind of shared with you and the examples that you have shared with us, which thank you so much for that. It's such a rich conversation, and we're getting so many examples and ideas and things. So I really appreciate all of you guys sharing all of the information that you have throughout. But we're really interested now to hear from you about what do you find helpful? What are some key things that you see that tell you family members are ready to move into the role of a parent peer support provider? And what are some areas you find difficult to assess? And how have you handled that? Or are there other things that you think people should be kind of integrating within their process of assessment as far as are there criteria qualifications that you use that you think it's important for other people to use? So we'll go ahead and it seems to be working pretty well to continue using the chat box. So we'll continue doing that. And we can potentially open the lines now, Colin, if people want to verbally share examples. So I think we'll go ahead. If it gets too loud with background noise, we'll have to mute. But I think we'll go ahead and open the lines and see if we're able to have a conversation together. So and anybody who's not planning to talk, as we open the lines, if you could mute your phone on your end, on your individual phone, that'll limit the background noise. All right, I think we're unmuted, so I don't know if anyone who's typing would like to verbally share some examples. Joan just shared that she likes to see a parent be able to use some humor around their journey, even though it was very stressful. I think that's a really, really good idea. I think that it's kind of that part of gaining some perspective of your own experience and your own journey. And humor definitely has been a lifesaver for me in navigating my journey. So anybody else want to share some examples with the line open? Annette shared that they always include a scenario with gay or lesbian parents in the interview process to assess some of the applicants' awareness of different family constellations. That's really, really good, idea as well. Again, goes back to, are our family members able to, respect other people's decisions and, work with diverse families in very diverse situations? And are they able to respect those differences in that diversity? That's so important when putting family members out in the field as peer support providers. Yeah. Some folks still typing, so we'll give them a minute. Anybody on the phone want to share something that they found difficult to assess, or maybe something they found that it works really well for them? All right. Tanya says, we find the interviewing process very important since it gives us an opportunity to see how far along they are in their own journey. Lillian shared, we're working on developing 15-question self-readiness assessment for potential family support providers to be able to think through some of the questions prior to an interview or applying. Wow, that's a really exciting development, Luann. I think that will be, we'll look forward to that. I think that would be a wonderful resource. Joan typed that one of the issues that she has is that a parent will tell me they're able to work with families who work and can work some evenings or weekends. Once they are hired, they decide they aren't able to do it. So some issues with availability around. Sometimes as a parent peer support provider, our schedules have to be pretty flexible to accommodate the families that we're working with schedule if they work during the day and they need to meet, in the afternoons or evenings or weekends. So that's a good, a good kind of concrete consideration that you have to use to assess, are they able to come into that role. Tanya writes, we find our cultural competency question difficult for people to answer. Does anyone have an example of how they handle that subject in the interview process? All right, so Tanya's looking for some help from folks around how do you kind of assess cultural competency.
Melissa, this is Millie. In answer to Tanya's question, one of the things that I found very helpful is having another what we call family support providers involved in the interview, so that they can ask questions, particularly if they are from a different type of culture. Just so having someone there about that. The other thing I did is provide an example of a situation that either I had been through in working with a family or someone else had been through in working with a family, like a Kurdish family I worked with, where I had to take my shoes off and they expected you to drink tea that had like 3 inches of sugar in it and maybe an inch of tea. Things like that, and how it was interesting to learn how they approach things and kind of setting the stage. So that was one of the things I did around cultural competency or more cultural responsiveness. Were they able to step outside themselves and learn about another culture?
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Millie. All right. We'll give folks another couple minutes. It looks like we have several people who are typing. Joan typed that they look for a parent who appears to be able to accept families who they are and what they want. Annette typed, it's interesting to talk with family partners about their thoughts around de-escalating a child and whether they've ever experienced a raging child. Okay, that can be a good one. It's definitely something they may encounter working as a peer support provider with families. Charlene, we have 2 interview process, an interview in a panel style. Our panels are culturally diverse as well as including individuals with disabilities. That's a really, really good strategy. Thanks for sharing that, Charlene. All right, we'll give one more, and then I think we'll move on. We've got a few things we still want to share with folks. Okay. Annette talks about it's tricky because legally we can't ask about the age of children. Yeah, and this I think comes up a lot for folks around as they're posting for positions about the issue of how do you assess lived experience and the diagnoses, disability issues of kids and families and the issue around discrimination and all of that. So that's definitely a factor that you have to take into consideration, and I think different places address it differently. I don't know if there's anybody on the call who wants to talk about kind of how they navigate that trickiness around asking about the age of the child. Annette continued to say for family partners that this can impact their ability to do the work. So it sounds like, Annette, you're talking about kind of the legal trickiness around that, but also it's an assessment piece of if their children have kind of gained enough independence and are old enough to kind of, for the family to be freed up to be able to do the work. Okay. Well, I think we'll move into the next section, but feel free to continue to keep sharing kind of your process or questions, and anything that doesn't get answered during today's call, we'll go back to the chat and we will follow up with folks. So I just want to, before we kind of wrap up, want to remind folks that we have some upcoming events that we want you to be aware of and have the opportunity to take advantage of. One of which is a Medicaid webinar that we will be facilitating next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that webinar will be around, will include Beth Stroll, Jane Walker, Jane Kalal from Arizona Family Involvement Center, and Ricky Harris from Tennessee Voices for Children. And they'll be speaking about how family organizations can become Medicaid providers. So I think that webinar should be extremely interesting and beneficial, so we wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that and could get access to registering for that. That will be held through the TA Center, just as this event was. We also have an in-person meeting in partnership with Youth Move coming up in July. And this will be a 2-day meeting focusing on how family and youth movements can work together to create partnerships and collaborations that will propel both of the movements forward. So it will be a session for family leaders and youth leaders, and for 2 days we'll be working on areas of how family organizations and youth organizations and programs can work collaboratively together to benefit both sides and help both the family and youth movement accomplish their goals. So we're really excited about it. We expect we will have a location nailed down and an agenda out for that in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eye open for that, and we hope to see some of you guys there. Last but not least, FREDLA has created an opportunity to highlight family organizations in the midst of Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. And our theme this year is around family-run organizations SOAR. And to participate, all you have to do is complete a very simple registration form, which you can download at the bottom of your screen where it says Balloon Flyer. It's a fillable flyer. You fill that in. And you return it to the info@fredla.org address that you see on your screen. And then we will mail you 2 dozen blue and yellow balloons that say Family Run Organization SOAR. And what we're asking is that you take a photo showing your family organization staff with your logo and your name if possible, and send that back to us because we no later than April 8th. And what we will do once we receive those photos is we are going to create a slideshow with music and some data that we've collected over the last few years around family organizations, and use that as a way to really elevate the importance and the necessity of family-run organizations as an integral component to the behavioral health field. So we really hope that you guys will participate in this so we can show the breadth of family-run organizations throughout the country and the numbers that are out there and the incredible work that all of you guys are doing every day with kids and families and with systems. As always, if you have ideas or feedback or suggestions about how we can better support you and your family through the learning community, or if you are in need of any support or assistance related to family leadership or involvement or your family-run organization, please feel free to contact us. We would be thrilled to be able to provide support to all of you, and if there's a way we can do that better, we definitely want to hear from you guys. And lastly, our next learning community will take place on April 28th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and our topic for our next learning community will be around core competencies for parent peer support providers. So again, we expect that will be a very, very important topic, and we hope you will all join us again next month for that conversation. Also want to remind folks that as when we originally started the learning community for family leaders, folks asked for a closed Facebook page where they could share ideas and ask questions, and we could share resources and things. So if you are interested in being part of that closed Facebook page, the link is on the screen. And I will also send invites out to folks who are on this call for you to be able to join the closed Facebook page. So you'll have a couple of options for that. So I think that is all we have for you today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It was an incredibly rich conversation, and thank you so much for all of the ideas and information that you shared in the chat box. And we will have this recording as well as the PowerPoint slides. We will make that available to all of you guys, and we will also post that on the FREDLA website at fredla.org. So we will make sure that everybody gets the slides. We'll also include the 2 files that were available for download, since some folks have had some difficulty in downloading those documents and resources. So we will make sure we follow up with you guys on all of that as well. So thank you for your time today, and we hope to see you all again next month on April 28th at 3 p.m.